In this module, we'll look at what are HSA eligible expenses. So now that we've looked at the money going into the HSA, let's look at the money coming out. We've talked about qualified medical expenses and the fact that if you take money out of an HSA for a non-qualified medical expense prior to age 65, you will be taxed plus a penalty. If you do it after, if you take money out after age 65, you'll just be taxed on that dollar amount. So what exactly is a qualified medical expense when it comes to an HSA? The IRS lists, as shown here, 213D and 502 forms. You'll be able to see, or publications, you'll be able to see the full listing. We also have that available on our website through HSA Vista, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But basically, at this point, qualified medical expenses or prescription drugs, dental, vision care, Medicare expenses, long-term care premiums, anything associated with Medicare is a qualified medical expense, with the exception of Medigap insurance premiums are not a qualified medical expense. Cosmetic surgery, funeral expenses, over-the-counter medicines, many of those are not a qualified medical expense for an HSA. This is not an exhaustive list of what the IRS shows as qualified medical expenses, but I wanted to show and highlight a few of these that I thought might be interesting. Acupuncture, ambulance services, chiropractic care. Capital expenses, someone has to build a wheelchair ramp. It's a capital expense that is a qualified medical expense. COBRA payments, typically healthcare premiums with the exception of Medicare, but regular healthcare premiums are not a qualified medical expense except in the case of COBRA, through unemployment. Dental treatments, doctor fees, exam, lab, long-term care premiums, we'll talk about what those are. It's based on one's age. Prescription drugs, psychiatric and psychological care, and we already talked about Medicare. We've already talked about a lot of this, but we wanted to bring it all together using the traffic signal analogy as to what's a tax-free distribution or withdrawal, what's a taxable without a penalty, and what's taxable plus a penalty. We've talked about a couple of these already. The qualified medical expenses, those COBRA payments, long-term care, Medicare with the exception of Medigap, rollovers and transfers. We just list that because it really has no impact at all. It's the same money moving from one HSA to another. Taxable, no penalty. Non-qualified medical expense, but you're 65 or older, you're just paying a tax on that. We've talked about that several times. Disability distributions. Someone is disabled through Social Security. They are able to take money out of their HSA for non-qualified medical expense without a penalty. They'll simply pay tax on that. And death distributions to beneficiaries other than a spouse. So a son or daughter simply going to pay ordinary tax on those on those funds. And really, when it comes down to it, when it comes to that red light, taxable plus a penalty. If you're taking money out of an HSA prior to age 65 for a non-qualified medical expense, you will be looking at paying ordinary tax plus a 20% penalty. If you still have questions with regards to this module, please email us at info@accesspointhsa.com.